If you could push a magic button and have your kid be happy or successful, I think we all know which button we would pick. However, in reality, this button does not exist. And as someone who's highly educated and raising kids in a community that prizes education, I fear that our children are internalizing the wrong message when it comes to achievement. Now, here are 3 quotes from high school students that are downright terrifying. I feel like I'm on a treadmill all week and the only way to escape is to get blackout drunk. Here's another. I wish my parents knew it was okay to get less than perfect grades. It's okay to not be exceptional at everything. And the third, we live in a community where everything has to look perfect. Your house, your grades, how you look. Not only does it have to be perfect, but it has to look effortless. Now, much of this is inspired by this book called Never Enough, When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic, What We Can Do About It, by Jennifer Breheny Wallace. And it really struck a chord. And so these kids, right, are feeling immense amounts of pressure, high school kids. And it's a pretty large swath of the US population. It's the top 25% of kids based on academic standardized tests. So these are the top 25% kids that are feeling this, that this book is written about. Now, here's a crazy thing that just blew my mind as soon as I read this. If you look at this group, they have the same likelihood of clinical anxiety, clinical depression, and substance abuse as 3 other high-risk groups. This is by the National Institute of Health, I believe. They have the same likelihood of anxiety, depression, and substance abuse as kids whose parents just immigrated to the United States. So they have nothing about the country. They have no ties to the United States. The second is kids who grew up in foster care. And the third is kids who have parents who are incarcerated. So let that just sit with you for a moment, right? These are some of the smartest, book smart kids in America, and they have the same likelihood of substance abuse or mental health challenges as kids in the foster system, kids who just immigrated to the United States, and kids who have a parent who is incarcerated. That is mind-blowing. And that it's mind-blowing. It's also not that surprising. Look, I live in LA. I went to an average private school back then a long time ago, but this is a different time. But where we live in LA now, we live near a school closest to a school in Brentwood called Harvard Westlake. And I'm sure there's some listeners here who went to Harvard Westlake or that know people who went to Harvard Westlake. When I went to Yale, the kids from Harvard Westlake were some of the smartest, well-rounded kids that I had ever met. I was blown away by them. And I think there were like 10 kids from Harvard Westlake at Yale in 1997. So it's a phenomenal school. And Harvard Westlake just last year has had 3 suicides in their high school. And I was reading a quote about it and it said, the more recent alums look older than they are. They look like they've had a hard life. This is an alum describing the recent alums from this, $70,000, $50,000 a year private school. So we set the stage here. This top 25% of kids are feeling immense pressure. And now you might say, well, this is just these crazies in New York or LA, wink, wink, 2 places that I've lived in. But it turns out that it's actually much more spread out because, again, it's the top 25% of school students across the country. So this is in Maine. This is in New Mexico. This is in Texas. This is in Colorado. This is in Washington State. This is in Nebraska. And it spans public and private schools as well. Now, again, the average family household income for these groups is $120,000. And they're also known as super zips. And I definitely live in a super zip. It's where there's a lot of money in the community. Even the public schools are semi-private. Our public school has like a $20 million endowment for a public school system, right? And they're always asking you to donate money and so on. So these are these super zips, again, across the country. No state is immune from this, representing the top 25% of kids. So that sets the stage. And again, I feel very connected to this topic because I know a lot of these parents. And most
importantly, I am at risk of becoming one of those parents if I already haven't become one of them. And I'm sure those of you who are listening feel this way as well. As you see the struggles that these kids are having, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And so they're very relatable in that regards as well. In fact, as I'm reading this entire book, as you'll see, I'm saying to myself, wow, this could be an adult. This could be a rad reader. This could be a Wall Streeter. This could be a startup founder, in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s. Okay, so that sets the stage of what's going on with these the challenges that these kids are facing. And look, there's the obvious culprits of social media, competition. So let's talk about it, right? I think that the other set makes the case that there are two real factors at play here. And when you put them together, they are combustible. So what are these two factors? The first factor is scarcity, and the second factor is status. So let's talk about the scarcity one first. We've talked about this on many podcasts before. We've written about it. It is definitely clear that in the United States, and presumably in most Western economies, that the quote unquote middle class, and I use quotes because it's quite hard to define, especially when you adjust for the coastal cities, the middle class has gotten eviscerated, right? And the income inequality gap between those that are extremely wealthy and those who are extremely poor has continued to widen. So there's this evisceration of the middle class, and you see that in with many different challenges. I mean, obviously, right today we're talking about inflation, but it's about a lot more than that. Rising healthcare costs, rising costs of higher education, rising home prices, a lack of a social safety net, right? Lack of unions and worker protections, right? Again, a lot of this is very America-centric. So, and then you have the more existential questions, whether it's AI or climate change or the rise of China. So it's extremely understandable that you can look at your kids and say, wow, you're going to have it way harder than I'm going to have it. And if I just take myself with something very simple, like I went to Yale, I think the acceptance rates when I went in 1997 were 8%, 9%. And the acceptance rates now, I haven't checked, but I think they're sub 5, maybe 4%, 3%. Globalization. There's a running joke with, Gen X's. It's like, I couldn't get into the college I went to today. And you meet the students with these ridiculous portfolios. So there's this fear, right? And again, like climate change, we talked about this on the episode with Paco. Climate change is real. People are being moved, or places are becoming uninhabitable because of climate change. AI, a huge wild card. And so you can look at your kids and say, man, it's going to be so much harder for you than it is for me, than it was for me. So we got to go hard, kiddo. Let's do this, right? So that's the scarcity argument, right? And by the way, this could apply to adults. It's like adults are constantly nervous about the next shoe to drop for them, whether it is climate change, whether it is their jobs being made redundant by AI. This is not just for future generations. Like a lot of people are feeling this in this moment. And I want to honor and acknowledge that different folks have different feelings about this. Personally, again, I feel very financially secure. And I feel that if those challenges came to our doorstep, we could use our funds and, by the way, our creative prowess to avoid them. So look, if I was really concerned about AI taking my job, I could run and be scared about it, or I could figure out how to use the opportunities that's going to come with AI, right? I think there is a mindset that we have to look at here as well. The other thing, though, about this, because I've spoken to a lot of parents that are like, we need to save a ton of money for our kids because the world for them is going to be bleak. And look, Lisa and I have already said we've set aside the funds to help our kids make their down payment for their first house, their only house in our eyes. And so again, it comes from a place of financial security, a place of remarkable economic privilege. But again, we're also more on the die with zero path. And they're like, once we do that, like we'll pay for college, like help you with your house. And then that's it. Like you're not getting anything else. Like we don't care about economic financial legacy. So again, there are different levers that people can or cannot pull. When I think of the scarcity thing though, too, there is that fear that there's another shoe that's going to drop. We're just one mistake from things being fucked. Everyone thinks that there's just one shoe, the next shoe to drop, and we're fucked, right? Again, climate change, financial crisis, and so on. And so you save, you work. I think there's a little bit of psychological fuckery happening there, because if you're nervous about money when you have $1 million, let's say, you're probably still going to be nervous when you double that and have 2 million. And you don't have to look around to see people who are extremely wealthy that are still truly worried about money. So I do think that to some extent, this let's just more things to insure against this potential calamity is like buying a ton of insurance, right? Like at some point you can overinsure yourself, right? You have to if you were so scared of car crashes, you would never leave your house, right? You would buy all the insurance and never leave your house. At some point, you got to step out and live into the real world, right? So how does this insurance and this scarcity apply to kids? Well, that's the pressure. You got to go to a top school. You got to nail your SATs. You got to do all these extracurriculars. You have to start entrepreneurship. You have to do these college essays, college prep, coaching, all of that. They talk about this kind of industrial complex of coaches and consultants. I was reading a story on Bloomberg that said that there is this consultant that charges $750,000 to get a kid that's on the cusp of getting into an Ivy League school, $750,000, right? Funny story about this, in this same article, the counselor got approached by a kid at a private school in New York, and the parent said, I'll give you 1.5 million if you don't take any kids from my child's class. That shit's bonkers, man. Bonkers. I used to work with some of these people, right? So that's the scarcity. Look, and we're going to talk about, we love our kids. We want what's best for them. But if you're paying $1.5 million to kneecap the other kids in your kid's school, I think you've lost the plot. And I think you could even rein that in. Look at sporting, look at AP courses, look at all that. You might have lost the plot, right? So that's the scarcity side of the ledger. Now let's flip over to the status side of the ledger, right? Now, status, this is parents, this is where I'm talking to you. Kids your kin can feel like the status extension of you. I mean, think about it. If there's two parents on a soccer field and one kid is scoring a hat trick and the other kid is a bench warmer, you'd have to be not a human to at least feel something, right? So that's the status side, is that we are projecting. The book makes the argument that we are projecting our status to our kids. And so that's why it feels so good to walk to your friends like, my child went to Yale, or my child's working at McKinsey, or my daughter works at Facebook, or my daughter, it doesn't even have to be, is it Peace Corps, right? There is the status because, and this comes up oftentimes in the book, how my kids are is a reflection of how I am perceived. Now, status gets even trickier when you get to college, where there is a true scarcity in slots. That's just the reality of it. They're not creating new Harvards. And so that status becomes even harder to attain. And so the pressure, the stakes feel so much higher. There's that quote from Jung that says, the greatest burden that a child must bear are the unlived dreams of their parents, right? So again, there is a lot of projection. Think about it, parent. If you feel insecure about your own standing, do you think that you're going to project confidence into your child? Or is that insecurity going to percolate into whatever it is, right? So that is that dangerous combination. There's that scarcity, like this is a competitive world. And then the status, I need to show right, who I am. And then the thing about being high status in many of these communities is that you have very little room to grow up, much more room to fall, right? So status preservation. I was listening to a comedian, Tim Dillon's, talk about the suicides at Harvard Westlake. And he was saying how he's a gay man who has no plans of having kids. But he's saying, if I had kids, I'd want them to be middle class because they're not riding these sky high expectations. My dad, mom went to Yale, you have to go to Yale. That the lowering of that bar, right? And it reminds me of this Tim Urban quote: happiness equals expectations, reality minus expectations, right? Happiness equals reality minus expectations. So it's very hard to change your reality, right? That you can't create new slots at Harvard, but expectations, which are, reality minus expectations can be crazy high. And that's the point that this book makes. The expectations for these kids are crazy high. They've got to be great at sports. They have to be great at academics. They have to start nonprofits. And what they call the third shift, I don't know what the second shift is, but the third shift is they got to be great on social media, right? They have to present well. So you could see how that combo is really, really crazy. Now, I want to bring up a quote that came up. And it's like, look, you're probably saying to yourself, look, Kate, I don't care about the status stuff. I just want my kids to be happy. And there's this quote in the book by Amy Chua, I think, who wrote the book Tiger Mom. And it said, if I could push a magic button and my kid could be happy or successful, I would always push happy. But there is no magic button. And furthermore, as you know from listening, right, what does happiness even mean? Pleasure, status, accolades, power, love, the ability to get love, to receive love. What is happiness? That is a question that the philosophers have been debating since the beginning of time, right? And you could see now how the paths are coalescing here. All right. So what arises in this, and this is like where I feel this, is kids feel that they are conditionally loved. And I know this about myself. Like, I have conditional self-acceptance, self-love on myself. Where, like, I love myself more when I achieve things, and I love myself less when I don't achieve things. And I've worked a lot. I've gotten much better at kind of releasing the grip of that. But if we love ourselves conditionally, there's a good chance that we are going to at least project that we love our kids conditionally. And what a tragedy that is, right? I mean, we would never outright say, I love you if you do well on this test, and I love you less if you do poorly on this test. We don't. But in the book, my friends, there's countless examples. Kids are masters at understanding doublespeak. So they give this example where the kid would bring home the report card, and if the grades were good, then immediately the parents would open it and talk about it. And if the grades were bad, they would wait a couple days and like find the right moment, right? Another kid talked about the mood in the house, just the mood, not even the language. I think everyone listening to this is way too smart, using quotes, to say, great grades, you're an awesome kid, Charlie. Or like, oh, a C. Like, we don't do that. It's the very subtle cues, like, whoa, or maybe that's not subtle, but it's the cues that we give, right? And this really, really, really makes me think about this question of like, kids pick up on what you do, not what you say. Like, you could say, I don't care about grades, but if you're always asking them how the tests go, you're not asking about grades. You care about grades. And that's one of the biggest takeaways that I've taken from this. I've got check. Even my 6-year-old, she's been crushing her spelling test. Look at it. She's been crushing her spelling test. And there was one where she got like 2 wrong. And it was like an innocent question. It's like, oh, did you notice what you did wrong here? Or do you notice what you would have done differently? Like, being self-conscious. And she just turns to me. She's like, you don't love me because I didn't do well on it. I was like, what the fuck? So again, my 6-year-old is picking out these little cues. I spoke to another rad reader who said her parents, the kid was talking to the therapist, and they were like, the parents were super intense. And this is where I'm super intense. Like I exercise like a madman. I work a ton. I don't watch TV. I go on these crazy diets, like crazy, crazy stuff. I'm intense. I don't want my kids. I never tell my kids to be intense, but that's the thing. I model intensity. So if I'm modeling intensity, then they just see intensity. If I say I'm not intense and then I go fucking run 10 miles because I'm bored, that's modeling intensity. That's telling your kids that you value intensity. I'm personally stuck here because I don't know what to do. I can't take away my own intensity because it's a part of who I am, but I don't want to show it so vividly to them. So I genuinely feel stuck here. So conditional self-acceptance. Before we go on, this, as you know, we're done with productivity class. We're done really writing about productivity. We care, but but we're moving into much smaller programs, like programs where we get parents to talk about this shit. So check out radreads.co/coaching. We have rolling cohorts. I'm really passionate about this stuff because it's scary and our kids are our precious cargo, right? And we want to be better, right? So conditional self-acceptance. Again, like I said, this trickles down from the parents, right? I was reading one of the quotes here. It says, kids can feel the difference between a parent who has 2 jobs to make ends meet and those who rather spend time at work. Oof. Right? Kids are smart. They pick up on these subtle cues. So yeah, I wonder. And the other thing too is because they're kids, we all have the negativity bias, right? It triggers our fight or flight. So if you got 10 pieces of feedback and 2 were bad and 8 were great, you would think of the 2 that were bad. Kids are even more sensitive to that. So all of those cues that we might be giving them, what they're hearing, again, through what they're seeing and embodying through parents' activities in this book is you love me if I do better, if I perform better, which is wild. And I get it. I look at my peers. We love ourselves if we do better, right? Like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So this comes as question then. And here I'm going to interject into a discussion about heterosexual couples and talk about, and men and women. And specifically, I'll talk about my own situation because there is a big part of this that in this book where they address mothers who stay home to raise kids, right? Because one of the arguments that the book makes is that everyone wants to know that they matter. They want to know that they have a purpose. And if you are a primary caretaker, stay-at-home parent, usually, not always, usually moms, then you matter through your kids. It's conditional mattering. And what happens is that every ounce of your fiber goes downstream, right? And again, there's like some status preservation happening here too. And I could see this in my own marriage, right? Where I have the luxury of being the primary breadwinner. And so I'm not the parent that they call when there's an emergency, when there's something going down at school. I can close my door during COVID and just be like, I got to work. I got to make the money. And Lisa, who you'll meet on one of these upcoming podcasts, Lisa, put her career on hold, shelter career to raise our kids. Her career as an artist. So when you have lost that thing, again, this is for parents that are staying at home to raise kids, then you're clinging to whatever piece of mattering that you can find. And in this case, it would also be putting everything into your kids. But again, that depletes you, and your sense of mattering becomes conditioned on how your kids do, not fully baked into your core, right? Because at the end of the day, we all want to know that we matter. And so I've laid out kind of the challenges thus far about what's happened. And so let's come to some of the possible remedies. So the first one is you got to show and tell your kids that they matter independent of their achievements. And I think that that sounds obvious, but again, I have to really think about that, right? So they give a few, I mean, kids need to feel seen, right? They need to feel and experience your love. And again, because of that negativity bias, they need it so much, okay? I want to share with you all, because this ties back a bit, there's clues here on this whole concept of mattering. So when our youngest was 4, I think, she was having a ton of tantrums. And look, we have funds, we're curious, we want to do better, right? We went to see a child therapist. And we said, look, we're doing everything. It was just these crazy meltdowns, right? And it was really like mean during them. And the therapist taught us this thing called PCIT training. And it's parent-child interaction therapy. PCIT. And what you do in PCIT is there's a few rules. So you have special playtime with your child, and that's 5 minutes. And during this special playtime, there's a few rules. The first is you're not allowed to ask questions. The parent's not allowed to ask questions because I can't remember exactly what happened, but questions, there's like this weird power dynamic where you're like, I have the answers and you need to come to me for the answers. So it's to really flatten the power dynamic. So you're not allowed to ask questions and you're not allowed to give commands. So that flattens out the power dynamic. And then while you're playing with the kid, you have to do like a lot of praise. Like, oh, I see how carefully you're playing with, oh, I see you're cleaning up the toys. You have to praise, you have to make them feel seen. I am watching you comb, Barbie's hair. Just basically making them feel seen, praised, appreciated. And you do that for 5 minutes every day. And we did that. And after 3 months, they just stopped. It's just 5 minutes a day. It was called special playtime. It was funny because after this, Lisa would joke. She's like, I need to play special playtime with you. Like me praising her and making her feel seen and making her feel loved. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. Like I'm not the most dishing of that stuff, especially in my marriage. I can be emotionally sealed off. So it's like a simple reminder that these things that we assume that we do, like, I love my kid. Yeah, I love my kid. But my default way of interacting with her doesn't always make her feel seen, doesn't always make her feel loved. And so there were a few tactics. The one that I think the biggest takeaway that I took away from this book was be a puppy dog. And ever since I read this, I've been trying to live this. It's, how dogs, when you come home, they just jump on you, they lick you, they don't care what's happening outside. They don't care if it's raining. They don't care if you're tired. They don't care they just shower you with affection. And it's just like a reminder that that kids need that, right? And we have that in us, right? If you have 5 kids, you could in theory do it with 5 kids. And I know you're going to say, I'm really tired. I can do it every day. Yes, but if you're not doing that for a sustained period of time and you say you value family, then you need to check yourself, right? So being puppy dog, God, that was so powerful. The other thing is the ratio of praise to criticism, right? I think that, again, when the grades come in, you can start, and again, we haven't hit this point because the homework's not that hard, but I could see the tension start to rise over completing work, just doing it. Forget like getting it done with excellence, just doing it. And so, again, this is actually from marriage therapy books. It's the ratio of praise to criticism gets out of whack. So you need very high praise and low criticism. And they had a great quote that said, instead of getting furious, get curious, right? So kind of checking your anger, checking your praise versus your criticism. There was another one that was like writing a strengths letter to your kid each year and telling them that you see them for who they are outside of the achievement. I see how sweet you are. I see how kind you are. So this strength letter is something that I've really been thinking about. I want to flip gears here because there is this tweet that I saw from my friend Ted Gonder, and it's about presence and it's about the ability to emotionally regulate your kids. So I'm going to read it to you. He said, be the parent that has the slowest heartbeat, the most relaxed body, the emptiest mind, so that you can be there to co-regulate your children, right? We're talking about emotional co-regulation here. He said, our eldest son had had a very complex day at school. Let's leave it at that. Big feelings, big lessons learned, big conversations. He was completely overwhelmed when we picked him up, tears and all. But because we redesigned our life around the last 8 years to be present parents, flexible remote schedule, intentional slowness, we were able to take him for a walk in the forest, listen to everything that happened in the day, and connect in the way he needed us to be there for him. Yesterday was a massive moment for the growth and development of his character, and it was essential that we were there as parents in a non-stressed state. How beautiful is that? Be the parent that has the slowest heartbeat, the most relaxed body, the emptiest mind. Be this so that you can co-regulate your children. Wow. Right? And here we are being like, yo, let me book you a coach for piano and a Mandarin tutor and a this and a that. Like, can you emotionally co-regulate your kids? And a sidebar here, like that's been I basically, for now, I've cut out drinking since that last episode. So it's been like 5 or 7 weeks. I think I have 2 drinks in 7 weeks. The ability to not react, the ability to be there, regulate them emotionally because I am regulated and I wasn't regulated because of my alcohol consumption. All right. So this gets to the next word is finding purpose. We talked about stay-at-home parents and the need to find purpose. Look, if you're listening to the Examine Life podcast, you're wondering what your purpose is. And kids are also wondering what their purpose is. And they know if they're being forced to start a charity. There's many examples of this. Kids start charities to get into college. Start, not be in them. Start them. If you are being forced to do some kind of extracurricular, start a charity because it's going to get you into a college, then that's where a gut check needs to happen, right? Kids want to find their purpose just as much as you and I want to find our purpose. And that's not an easy question, right? I mean, look, I've dedicated a career to finding that for myself and helping y'all find it. And I still don't know exactly the answer, right? But helping your child find a purpose. And I think one of the big takeaways here was that we've become such a hyper-individualized society. And when you get into these exercises of like competing in this college or being the star athlete of the team, or your parents are offering $1.5 million so that you don't take any kids of their peers, right? We have lost the plot on individuality. And look, I'm all for individuality. Like I love my own agency, but I'll tell you, even at 44, what I'm realizing is that so much of what I thought was just me is the whole island of people around me. It's spouses, it's spouses, it's my spouse, it's my friends, it's my parents, it's my community, it's my students, it's my colleagues, right? And to think, I know when I was younger, I was like, no, all of this is because of me. No, it's just not true. It's not all because of me. And I think that showing kids that it's not, like, think about the message, like, crush Sally in track so that you can get the scholarship. Destroy John on the SATs so that you can get into Harvard. Win the valedictorian because you are the greatest. Like, there's so many examples. Like, people are trashing their friends, and as a result, they're so lonely. Everyone is on an island by themselves. People are so fucking lonely. And I say that with the adults too, and particularly the men that are listening to this. 44-year-old men are lonely, right? And I think we've taken this hyper individuality and turned it into, and believe that that's the way we need to live. Look, I moved away from my family, away from most of our friends because of the thing we wanted to do. And I don't regret it, but it just shows that in other cultural moments, that just wouldn't happen. You don't move away from your parents when you have kids, especially when you live right next to them, right? So I think a lot of things, we've lost the plot of it all, right? We have lost the plot. So the last thing, and because this comes up often in our different programs is this concept of atelic and telic activities. And so a telic activity is an activity with an outcome. So I read finance book so that I get better at my job. I go to the gym so that I look fit. I get my nails done so that I look pretty. And so there are so many of our activities have this outcome. That's why I started Rad Reads, and like way back in the day, is to help people get more of those, more outcomes. When you're so outcome focused, you lose the plot, right? Because you're always forward looking, you're always living in the future, right? These kids are always living in the future. When you're so outcome focused, you lose the plot, and you realize that so much of the beauty of life is in the presence, in the everydayness. It's a long talk with a loved one. It's a hike. It's a delicious sip of water. And we adults here, Rad Readers, parents have come and we've cleaved that. We can't just listen to music in a car. We have to listen to a podcast on two speed because we need that achievement. We need that ambition. Look where it trickles down to. And I'm getting excited because I'm getting frustrated and hyped, angry, confused because I do this. I am guilty of this a lot. And so our kids internalize this message that everything needs to be done for an outcome. You can't just learn the violin because you enjoy the violin. You have to learn the violin because it's going to help you get into Stanford, right? One of the kids said, my parents discouraged me from hanging out with my friends because hanging out with friends isn't productive, right? Think about that. A teenager getting the message that they shouldn't hang out with their friends because it's not productive. And a big, big teaching for everyone in our community is to re-inject these AT-like activities into your lives. And the book makes this great point that one way to do that is to have chores, to your kids have chores. Because think about it, as time is money, so parents don't do chores because they buy back the time. And then kids don't do chores because the parents rather them do their homework. And the percentage of kids that do chores is like plummeted in the past 30 years. It's really fascinating. But the thing about the chores, it shows that we are a unit. We help each other out. We are a team. We are a family, right? So it's less about having more free time to do what? So you can go achieve? No, it's so that you can understand what it means to get someone's back, even in the smallest way. So that's another takeaway that I'm going to take from this book. So with that, I'll wrap with a question that my daughter asked me the other day. She didn't want to do our homework. It was my 9-year-old. And she said, Dad, why do we have to do schoolwork? Why do we have to do math? Why do we have to do reading? And my immediate response was like, well, because then you can get a job and it's hard to live in this world without a job. And you need to, basically said, you need to get on the track so that you can have a good life. Again, you could see how the cues are so subtle. I don't even fully believe that in the sense that, like, look at my career. So let's think about that question. When a kid asks, why is it important that I do well in school? Why do I need to learn how to read? And you can take those questions even further. Ask your kids, what does it mean to live a good life? That's all we want. Remember that quote? If I could push a magic button and my kids could be happy or successful, I'd take happiness all the time. There's no magic button. So then why don't you ask your kids? I'm going to go ask my daughter right now. What do you think it means to live a good life? What does it mean to be a good person? Who do I admire, right? These are the ways that we defang that conditional self-acceptance and self-love. So with that, it's a great book, a lot to think about. I know we're all trying our best. We are all trying our best. And to some extent, a lot of this is our blind spots, right? These are our own insecurities coming out. These are societal pressures coming out. This is status rearing its head, right? It's this really strange cocktail of, look, this is why it's important to live an examined life. So you turn over those rocks so that all of it doesn't come crashing down to your kids. But look, when you do turn them over, when you do ask those questions, when you do examine things, man, it's beautiful on the other side. And imagine what that would be with your kids as well. All right, gang, y'all are awesome. Peace. bradreeds.co/coaching. Join us for an upcoming cohort. Y'all are the best. Bye.